Everyone, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk today about a lot of the different problems and things that I've faced over the last 2 years trying to build my company. And I just wanted to call out a little bit. I've been in Bangalore for the last couple of days, and I've been loving the energy here. It's amazing. Like, a lot of people say that this is like it's like the San Francisco of India, but I think it's better than San Francisco in a lot of ways. Like, it's a lot of good energy here. So let's get into it. So, title of this presentation, how I built a data platform that thousands of engineers use in 1 year by myself. So, I'm going to start this presentation off with a quote. So, this is a quote. Sam Altman made this quote like a couple months after ChatGPT came out. I think this was like January, February of 2023. He said, "We are going to see one-person billion-dollar companies because of AI." And honestly, when I first was playing around with ChatGPT, I was kind of unimpressed, kind of not, like, everyone else was like, wow, this is like life-changing, like everyone's jobs are going to be gone in 1 year, 2 years, whatever they say, right? And I don't know, I was more skeptical about it initially. And I have since changed my mind for the most part on this. I still feel like I have a healthy amount of skepticism, but this quote is definitely something that inspired me in a very significant way. And the main reason for that is there are 3 trends that are going on right now that are all very powerful, right? We're going to start with the social media trend. I don't know if y'all are probably familiar with Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast has something like 300 million subscribers on YouTube. Imagine if each of them give him $1. He can make $1 subscription, he can make 300 mil a month, right? Kind of crazy, right? And one of the things that social media has allowed people to do is live their life with an unbelievable amount of leverage. One of the things that I noticed, and this was one of the things that really got me to quit my job, was I recognized that once I hit like 300,000 followers on the internet, I was like, I bet I can get those people to give me like, 10 cents a month, right? There's got to be a chance that I can get that much money from people. And so when you get a certain amount of amplitude, you get a certain amount of voice, this allows you to have an unbelievable amount of leverage. And there's other trends, right? You have big data. Big data is why a lot of y'all are here. A lot of y'all are data engineers, machine learning engineers, AI engineers, data analysts, data scientists, analytics engineers, all the other titles that are out there that you could possibly have in this big data world. Big data, that was something that's kind of been hype, but also not hype for like the last 10 years or so. I remember when I was starting my career back in like 2014, what got me into big data was I saw a stat that said 90% of the world's data has been generated in the last 18 months. And I was like, wow, that sounds like a very, very big, heavy problem that we're going to need to figure out. And those trends have not really slowed down. Like, we're still generating massive, massive amounts of data, and it's still, for the most part, not being used. Not being leveraged to its fullest potential. And then even when it is crunched in the analytics, we build dashboards that then are viewed one time and then thrown away. There's bad data about that. There's some like 80% of dashboards are used one time and then never looked at again. So the amount of data that we have that is being unused is massive, but there's still a massive opportunity there. Everyone in this room recognizes the opportunity of big data. And then, the most hypey of them all is AI, right? AI is going to be the big thing that everyone's talking about. It's the thing that everyone's scared about. Everyone thinks it's going to take everyone's jobs, and it's going to change everyone's jobs, and it's definitely going to change people's jobs. But like, what it looks like and how that's going to happen is going to be, who knows, right? We can all make our predictions. But anyways, you have these 3 trends, but then there's actually intersections of these trends, right? Because if you intersect AI with big data, you get ChatGPT or Anthropic or Llama or whatever, all those different foundational models that essentially just downloaded the internet and was like, here, now you can query the internet. It's essentially what they did, right? And then you have the intersection of social media and big data. That's where you get the data engineering influencers. That's where I'm at. So also some of y'all probably know Joe Reese and Chip Huan. They're also in that space. Then you also have AI with social media. This is where you can kind of like create outreach, cold outreach. You can imagine like I could send like a personalized email to 300,000 people with AI. Probably convert pretty well because that's a good intersection. I couldn't come up with a good name for this one, and I called it Spam Masters. But the main thing I'm trying to talk about here in this presentation is the intersection of all three. The intersection of AI, big data, and social media. And this is where I saw the opportunity to build a one-person empire. When I noticed this, I started to have a great deal of anxiety about working my job at Airbnb. Airbnb was paying me very, very well. If you work at Airbnb in the Bay Area, they're in the top 1% in the Bay Area. So in the world, it's unbelievable. And so with that being said, I also just saw this vision of my life, this vision of AI and big data and social that was like, and I felt like my job was holding me back and that I needed to leave and I needed to try something new. I needed to try something different. I needed to capitalize on these trends. And that was a lot. I definitely lost myself because I had built an identity around working in big tech, working in FANG, right? It's like a lot of those big tech engineers are like, well, I work at the best companies in the world, so like, you know, I don't know, that's like they build their life around that. And so I definitely lost myself for a couple months, but then I kind of found myself over the last 2 years. So we're gonna go over how I found myself. And so what are we talking about today? So with Data Expert, I have done 7 cohorts of students over the last 2 years. And each time we have made incremental improvements to the architecture of Data Expert. We're going to go over 5 of the iterations of the architecture and the mistakes I made along the way between each iteration. One of the things that I want to emphasize here is that software is not created from a perfect architecture. It's not created from the guys on top being like, I have a mastermind plan. As long as we implement it perfectly, then guess what? Everything will work. It's not how it works in the real world. And all y'all know that. If you've dealt with any technical debt, you know that that's not the case. Talk about the mistakes. Mistakes are the nature of software, especially like if you're an entrepreneur trying something out for the first time. And then last but not least, we're going to look at some of the future. What's the future going to look like for data engineering? So I quit my job almost exactly 2 years ago. It'll be 2 years tomorrow, actually. And I quickly realized that I needed to make some money. So I was like, all right, let's make a boot camp. And I did the V1 boot camp, 50 students. Then the next one, 150. Next one, 175. The May boot camp was 350. And then we did a boot camp in January that was like 350 again. One of the things you might notice here is each boot camp almost has double the amount of students of the previous boot camp. And that causes a lot of problems if you want to be a one-person company trying to teach 350 people. So let's go into this. This is the history, but we're going to talk about each of these architectures. Okay. So when I first started my company, I didn't want to write a bunch of code because I had been burnt so many times as an entrepreneur writing a bunch of code. Because one of the lessons I've learned over the last 5-7 years is if you build it, they will come is a lie. It's a lie. You have to match the distribution to the value. So what it should be is build as little as possible and then market like hell, right? That's the actual truth of how to make it as an entrepreneur. So the first version of this boot camp, no code at all. Like I did not write any code, right, for this first version of the boot camp. You'll see we had Stripe. I set up a Stripe account. We manually sent invoices to people. We manually added them to GitHub, manually added them to Discord. We did a free trial on Databricks, and we did, data lake modeling on Postgres, which was very confusing to people because at the time I kind of like was moving a little bit too fast because I wanted to teach people Iceberg because I was one of the very, very first users of Iceberg back in 2018. I was the 3rd beta tester ever of Iceberg, and I was like, well, I want to teach that. But then I realized that it was like kind of hard to set up, so I was like, all right, well, we'll figure that problem. We can kind of kick that can down the road. It took us like I kept kicking that can down the road, but we'll talk about that in a second. Anyways, one of the things about this architecture is that it was beautiful. Set it up. I set up this entire architecture in 2 hours. Shows you that like a lot of what y'all are thinking about, if you have a startup that you're trying to build and you think, oh, it's going to take so much time, you're lying to yourself. It's not going to take so much time. It's just about focusing and actually getting the effort and getting the things into place. So obviously this architecture has drawbacks. Let's talk about the benefits and drawbacks, right? So what are the benefits here? Just talked about it, 2 hours, set up the whole thing. No server costs, great. Tons of built-in functionality. So I used Google Classroom to host all my content and all that stuff. It worked out pretty well. There were some major disadvantages to this strategy though. So Databricks free trials were horrendous. Getting everyone set up, so we had 50 students at the boot camp, right? 15 of them were able to successfully set up their Databricks free trial and learn Spark. And I'm like, if I was able to do 15 over 50, right? And I'm like, hey, give me $2,000, and there's a 30% chance I'll be able to teach you. Most of you would be like, fuck that guy, not gonna talk to that guy, what? And so that was something that I learned very quickly, that is not something that I wanted, right? Docker for Flink, we used a lot of Docker setups, super painful. A lot of students, one of the things I learned from this first bootcamp is the different archetypes of people who are learning from me. We have analysts who have no engineering experience. We also have software engineers who have a ton of engineering experience. And trying to build something that satisfies both of those groups of people is very difficult. Manually sending invoices, never again. Never, ever sending manual invoices again. Low value effort on my time. And then Google Classroom. There was actually an absolute horrendous thing that happened with Google Classroom. So it was 2 weeks after the bootcamp ended, I found all my material pirated. Because Google Classroom has a download button. So I was like, well, we need to get rid of the download button. That's really dumb. That's like, hey, steal my shit, right? So massive risks. So I decided in the next bootcamp, let's write some code and let's try to mitigate some of these risks. So here is V2 architecture. This architecture is about 18 months old now. One of the things you'll notice now is we have a Next.js. So I love TypeScript. I love JavaScript. It's my favorite stuff, especially Next. Next is as fancy and awesome as Spark in a lot of ways, for its purpose. So we built Next.js app, bought a domain, very impulsively bought a domain. I was like, dataengineer.io, let's go, let's send it. That was a mistake. We'll see why in a little bit. Then we used Stripe to buy, and then still manual invites to Discord and GitHub. Then we added Kafka, so we actually added a real-time data feed. So when we were doing the lab in V2, we just used the web traffic from dataengineer.io and processed the web traffic in real time. So it's like a real actual data feed, not some toy-generated example. Because that's one of the things that I really try to focus on when I teach is real stuff. And you'll notice I actually got rid of Databricks. So what we did was I was like, ooh, there's a new promising startup called Tabular that I was really excited about. And we moved everything to be using Tabular for local Spark, to teach local Spark. And last but not least, we've got to lock down the content. So we used Stripe and Next.js to lock down the content with Amazon CloudFront to get rid of that download button so that it was a lot harder to pirate. So benefits of low code, manual invoices were gone. Made it so we could easily triple sales. So not 50 students, 150 students. I vividly remember June 28th of 2023, made $100,000 in one day. And I was like, holy shit, I like being an entrepreneur. This is amazing. And CloudFront, big win. We actually had a domain, also a big win. Because before that, we didn't have a domain. So it's hard to SEO, branding, all this stuff. It's hard for people to find me. Obviously, risks. We didn't change the data lake modeling. So we were doing data lake modeling on Postgres, which was painful. Because people are like, why are we doing weird data lake stuff in Postgres? I was like, then I would always be like, just trust me. If you move this into a data lake, it'll be better. Server costs were not zero, obviously, but they were cheap. It was like $100 a month, something like that. People didn't like moving from Databricks to local Spark because they were like, hey, we want to do stuff in the cloud. And I'm like, well, when we did it in the cloud, it was a mess. So it felt like I could not win. Through this whole journey, I felt like teaching Spark was literally the most difficult, challenging thing because there was no way to make people happy. Took a couple more iterations, and we'll talk about that in a second. Still tons of manual work with Discord and GitHub. With GitHub, if you have a GitHub organization, You can only invite 50 people a day to your organization. It doesn't let you invite more than that. If you try to invite more than that, like GitHub thinks that you're like abusing the system or something like that. And that causes some hiccups in the onboarding of the students here. But you learn. All right, so we wanted to address some of those concerns from V2. V2, if any of y'all took the YouTube bootcamp that I published over the last couple months, like in November, V2, that was the YouTube bootcamp, literally the same content. So now we're going into V3 content. All the stuff going forward is all paywalled. But one of the things you might notice, the things that we added here, right, were we added Starburst. So Starburst allows you to spin up Trino compute. This allowed us to actually do data lake modeling on Iceberg. So now we're actually teaching things the right way, teaching them how they're done actually in the cloud. Very powerful thing. Another very powerful thing here was we added in automatic invites to Discord, to GitHub. Saved my assistant's life. And another thing we added here was we added a query editor. So you can actually like run Trino queries from the phone. One of my goals when I built that was I was like, I want to teach people data engineering in such an accessible way that you can learn data engineering from the phone. You don't have to be on a laptop. And we were able to do that. We have you can do all of the data modeling content from the phone if you want to do it. It's kind of a pain in the ass, but it's possible. This one had some massive benefits. The data lake modeling with Trino and Iceberg was a smash hit. This bootcamp had the highest reviews that we've ever done. People loved it. It was awesome. Automatically adding people to Discord and GitHub, amazing. It's just like all of the suffering of trying to launch the bootcamp and onboarding the people and getting everyone access, all of this stuff just started to get smoother and smoother and smoother, and I started feeling like we were building a machine, something that was slowly picking up and going a little bit faster, a little bit faster, a little bit faster. And one of the things that I learned was you really want to leverage some SaaS products. So let's go back. So when I initially was building this architecture, I was like, I don't want to use a SaaS product. I don't want to use Starburst, because I was like, Starburst is just going to cost a bunch of money, and they were just giving me a Trino cluster. Why don't I just stand up a Trino cluster myself in EC2 and just do it myself and do it all the DevOps and all that stuff? And like, I suffered a lot. I wasted probably 2 weeks of my time like setting all that up to have something that didn't work that well. And then I recognized that like that was dumb for two reasons. One reason it's dumb is because EC2 and DevOps stuff is not something I should be doing. If I'm a one-person company, I don't want to have to use DevOps and engineering and sales and marketing and all that stuff, right? You want to be passing as much off to other people as you can so that you can focus on what you do best, which for me is sales, marketing, content creation, teaching, those four. So if I'm focusing on things that are outside of that scope, that stuff should be managed by services. And Starburst is great. And guess what? One of the things that's even better that like made me open my eyes up even further about this was I was able to talk with Starburst. And I have a business relationship with them. And guess what? It's free. I don't have to pay for the compute. And if it's on EC2, I'm going to have to pay. And so it's even more. It's like I don't have to manage the DevOps, I don't have to pay, and I get to help them with marketing. So it's like you want to be thinking about ways that you can get win-win situations. And that was something that really opened my eyes up, because then I was like, wow, less engineering time, and it's free. And it just was like, there's different ways to build as an entrepreneur. Let's go to the... Okay, so we didn't change Spark in V3. We kept it the same, still used tabular. People were still disappointed. Next iteration, I was like, I'm not going to go 4 times in a row messing up the Spark content. And we got it right at the 4th time. It was great. And I had this vision of doing something where we have Kafka to Flink to Iceberg. I'm sure y'all noticed like in the presentations earlier today, they talked about this thing called Tableflow, which was even more epic than the way that I was thinking about it, because I had a vision of just teaching people like, this is how you get data into the data lake. And now, Confluent made it so that you click one button, and it's a lot easier. And one of the things that was nuts about this one is we grade homework. So there's 10 homework assignments in the boot camp, and in V3 we had 175 students. So that's 1,700 homework assignments to grade. A lot of homework to grade. And we had a bunch of graders who came on board, and they didn't do a great job. They were inconsistent, they weren't timely, and it was like, we get a lot of negative feedback about the manual grading of homework in V3, especially because it was like over the holidays. Like the boot camp ended on the 23rd of December, and then we needed like to have people grade the homework over the holidays, which was like, didn't happen, right, for obvious reasons. But yeah, that was kind of the risks for V3. So let's talk about V4. So this is the architecture from about a year ago. You'll notice as we go on and on and on here, there's just going to be more squares, more buttons, more things, more functionality. And a couple things here just to be thinking about. We added the ability to deploy pipelines in the cloud. We used Astronomer for this. Very nice. And it allowed Airflow to dump into Tabular, which Tabular is Iceberg, by the way. They got bought by Databricks, so they're kind of like Iceberg, Tabular. Tabular, it doesn't exist anymore, but they did exist. Another big thing, probably my favorite thing that we added in V4 was the automatic homework grading, because we suffered, right? 1,700 homework assignments, a lot of negative reviews from V3, and we were like, how can we handle this situation in a more innovative way? And one of the things that I recognized is when you think about teaching a lot of people, like say you're teaching 10 people, the 11th person isn't going to add that much pain to you, right? And then if you have 300 people, the 301st person is going to add even less pain. But the one thing that's not scalable, that's linear pain, is homework, right? Because every person is going to add the same number. It's like every person adds 10 more homework assignments that you have to grade. And so was there a way that we could handle that so that we could grade the homework in a more innovative way? And AI blew my mind when we implemented this. Some other areas that we wanted to fulfill some visions, that vision I was talking about earlier of Kafka to Flink to Iceberg, which Confluent has now, is we did Kafka to Spark streaming to Iceberg. That's what we ended up delivering on here. You'll see Amazon Glue in this diagram here. It's like right there. And the only other thing that we really added here was we added subscriptions. And another lesson that I learned, another painful lesson in a very similar vein to when I tried to set up Trino with EC2, is I also rolled my own authentication system, right? Did it all, the JWT tokens, the salting, the hashing, all that stuff. And guess what? I did a little bit of it wrong. And my sign-up form got abused by a script kiddie. And they sent out 70,000 phishing emails from my sign-up form. And I was like, wow, this is painful. This is not something that I want to deal with, right? And the lesson I learned from Starburst, I learned again, which was use a service. Because I was like, why do I give a single shit about authentication? That's not what I'm about, right? I don't care about authentication. So we added Clerk. Clerk now just manages all the authentication for Data Expert. And I've never had any problems since, right? Because it's just not my problem, someone else's problem, right? And you focus on what your company does best, and then you outsource everything else, right? Outsource stuff with SaaS. Because remember, one-person company. We're trying to do this, not trying to roll anything, not trying to deal with cybersecurity attacks. Like, I'm one guy. So those are the changes. And one of the things you might notice here is now we are up to thousands of users in this architecture. So we are scaling up. One of the things that y'all might ask is, how does a homework submission work? So one of the things is I saw the most interesting presentation earlier was that Marriott presentation where they had those follow-up emails from people who were looking to book, and then they got an email that was like customized. So we have a very similar thing here where we start here on the corner here, student submits the homework. What that does is that submits a grading job to Kafka, and then we have a Kafka consumer up here. This Kafka consumer is just running all the time, listening, waiting for jobs to be submitted. And you'll notice the instructor has to configure the homework assignment. So the instructor configures the homework assignment with three things: a rubric of how to grade the homework, a correct example of a correct submission, and an example of an incorrect submission. They can have n incorrect submissions as well. They can have as many as they want there. Like if they're trying to, the more data that the instructor provides, the more robust the homework grading is. So anyways, after that, the Kafka consumer job runs. It pulls in all the context. It pulls in, and then it creates a very big prompt that it passes to ChatGPT, and then ChatGPT will make a decision. Like, it will usually give a grade, pass, fail, A, B, C, whatever, however the instructor wants to configure it. And then it will send a grading email to the student, be like, hey, you passed, or hey, you failed, right? And then it will also send a notification down to data expert so that they can get pinged in the app as well. So this architecture is going to be very common, not just for grading homework, but just, you want to be thinking about this very abstractly, right? Of like, user does a thing that generates a ChatGPT job, probably asynchronously. That's what this does, asynchronous with Kafka here. And it does an asynchronous job, and then that causes ChatGPT to synthesize information and then send it back to the user of like, hey, this is what happened, or hey, this is like what you may be wanting to look at. So this architecture is going to, I know I'm going to be using more of this architecture in the future in my boot camps and all over the place, and definitely learn this. This is where businesses are going to change. This is how AI is going to transform the business. Because after we implemented this, homework went from being one of the most painful parts of the boot camp, one of the most painful, suffering parts of the boot camp. And now, it's just, I don't even think about it. I don't even think about it. It's just, it's like a solved problem. It's something that just, the pain completely disappeared. So that is an amazing thing. Like, and it's still one of the things that I'm like kind of stunned by, that like I don't have to even think about anymore. When it used last year, it was just such a big problem. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the benefits here, right, from the May from the May 2024 architecture. So when we moved from Heroku to Confluent, it was amazing. Because I don't know if you know, but like, just because a cloud provider offers something doesn't mean that it's good. You know, I'm just going to let you know, Heroku Kafka versus Confluent Kafka, Heroku Kafka is terrible in comparison. Like, you get no configuration, you get one topic, and there's nothing you can do. That's it. It's just, that's what you get what you get, and it's like more expensive too. It's crazy. It's more expensive, less configuration. So like, this is another lesson I learned here. Do your research. Just because a cloud provider offers something doesn't mean it's the best option. Maybe do a ChatGPT prompt of like, where's the best place to get Kafka, right? Or where's the best place for me to get a queue or a real time, whatever query you need to use. Remember, you should be using AI every day, all the time. It'll be amazing. Deploying pipelines with Astronomer, amazing. People like, when they got that feeling of like, hey, my pipeline is running in the cloud. It's actually up there. It's not running locally on my laptop. It's going to be running all the time. It's something that's just up there in the cloud. Obviously, just talking about the automatic homework grading, magical. And then final one here was actually finally completing the vision of Kafka to Iceberg via Spark streaming, of like showing people like, hey, you can get logged event data into Iceberg in real time. That was something that really was magical, and that caused my students to really, really just like find a lot of like, whoa. Still risks here, always risks. Inadequate access controls, painful. I had a student that ran a job that was like $1,500, and that's like their entire tuition. So I was like, thanks. Like, I break even on you now. And then automatic homework and homework graders would disagree sometimes. So ChatGPT doesn't get it right all the time, right? Even if you get all the context, everything right, it's like, it still hallucinates a small percentage of the time. And working on that. That's something that I think, but one of the things that I've recognized with that is it does as good of a job as a human though. Because guess what? Human graders also get it wrong. They also don't necessarily get it right 100% of the time. And so like, sometimes I think we might hold AI to a higher standard than we hold humans to. Because with humans, we have someone to blame. So, things to think about. So, this is the current architecture. Things have shifted a lot. There's not quite as many like arrows and green things on this slide, because I kind of realized that like things are a little bit more abstract and we can kind of do things. Like, the big thing that I shifted when I moved into this year was taking that idea of leveraging SaaS and leveraging products even more, right? So in January, first time I taught Snowflake, first time I taught Databricks. We have Snowflake, Databricks, Glue, Starburst, Confluent. All of these things are now available. So when you sign up to Data Expert, you just get a credential for all of these things, and you get access to the cloud immediately, right? You can just get in. It's a very powerful way to do things. So that's going to be the big difference, is that, along with students are able to create their own topics with Confluent. So when they get access to Confluent, then they can go and make their own topics, which is way better than when I was doing Heroku Confluent or Heroku Kafka. Because with Heroku Kafka, everyone had to share their own topic, and I was like, well, just filter to your messages. And they were like, well, that's dumb. That feels very inefficient. And I'm like, it totally is, but that's because I picked the wrong provider. So creating topics, very powerful. Allows students to do real time. Amazing stuff. So the other thing that I did here was I have Flink jobs that take all of the Confluent data and dump it into Iceberg, which I thought I was being so smart. I was like, wow, I wrote like, a couple hundred lines of code, and now all of my Kafka data shows up in Iceberg, just immediately shows up in Iceberg. But I don't know, like with the presentation today, now I feel less smart because I'm like, now instead of writing hundreds of lines of code, you just click a button, and that feels even smarter, right? That feels like, whoa. So like in the end, I don't even think, the little squirrel guy up here, I don't know if he's gonna be like in the app as much. Like I'm not gonna be, or like he will be there, but just on the Confluent side, not like me managing the deployment and me like running the Flink for myself. So that's gonna be the kind of the V5 architecture that we've been kind of working through. So what are the benefits here? Adding Snowflake and Databricks access, should have done it a year ago. Well, I did, right? I feel like this is one of those things where like the emotional pain from V1, when like I just catastrophically failed teaching Databricks in the free trial, it made me think like, wow, I'll never be able to pull this off. And like one of the things that I learned from this was like, when you have just an absolute epic fail, to don't let that like change, don't come up with narratives about that, right? Try to just learn from it. Because like for me, it was like, the narrative was like, I'm like, I should never teach a cloud platform ever, right? I should only teach my own stuff because otherwise I'm just gonna fail, right? And that honestly probably set me back. I probably could have made an extra like $500,000 in 2024 had I not told myself that story, because I could have brought in these platforms sooner, faster, better, right? And then another big one here is having Iceberg share all the data between Snowflake, Databricks, Trino, and Airflow. Very powerful. That's the vision everyone's talking about, right? Is this whole idea of like, well, if we just put everything in Iceberg, then everything will be great, right? So one of the things that I've noticed is that is true, but it's also like still painful, I guess, when you think about it. Like, because when you dump everything to Iceberg, you still have to like move it out of Iceberg and like have to like move it somewhere else. So like, for example, like in my startup, we did analytics. Oh, whoa. There we go. We did analytics on Postgres for a long time. And you can just run the query on Postgres and it's done, right? You don't have to like move data around. You don't have to do any ETL. It's just done. Solved problem. But that's where like, for a small company, it's fine, but once you get to a certain size, that becomes more problematic as like things scale, right? But you don't. It's a lesson here. Don't run analytical queries on your production databases. Just don't do it. Like it's not a good thing, even for small companies. I've had problems where I've like ran a group by statement and then it like locked production for all my users because it was like too expensive. And so you can have problems there where like, and you don't even see those problems because a lot of times they like don't show up unless certain conditions are there. So you want to be careful there. And obviously, definitely using Kafka and Flink to populate Iceberg tables in real time was awesome because it made it so when my students created their topics and they just used their producers to create the data, then they could query the data in the UI from Data Expert, from the like the actual like web UI. Really powerful stuff. Obviously, every platform has risks. We're still thinking about other things here. Adding Snowflake and Databricks hurt my margins quite a bit. So they add several $1,000s a month in cost. So there is a minus there in terms of like balancing things of like, do you want to add more platforms? Because each platform is going to have some sort of incremental cost. And the only way that you can like manage that margin is if you pass that cost on to the student. And that's not necessarily the right way to do it. There's a lot of balancing that you want to be thinking about. Another big thing here is like managing the access for Databricks and Snowflake people, because I have a subscription product where it's like you get 1 month, and then it's like, well, when you like churn and you cancel, then I have to like undo all the access, or I have to like revoke all the access, and that's like a lot more work than I thought it was going to be. Another big thing here is like you almost get like when you're like scrolling Netflix and you're like, what should I watch? And and sometimes you're there for like 10 minutes, and you just like can't decide what to watch. I think my platform is starting to suffer from that a little bit, because now it's like you can build a pipeline with Glue, with Trino, with Databricks, with Snowflake, and you can build with Flink. And it's like a lot of students are like, well, what should I pick? And then it's like, earlier cohorts didn't have that problem because it was like there was one option. So it's like, use this option. And it's like easier. But like at the same time, it's like I think a more of a real world thing, because it opens up the idea of like, hey, you can build a pipeline with all of these tools, and it's important to know which tools to pick. All right, we're getting to my favorite section. This is my favorite section because I don't know if you know, but making mistakes is my favorite thing. Because guess what? When you make a mistake, you learn. And that's how you get better, because you learn in a very like intense way, and that's one of my favorite things. So we're going to summarize a lot of the mistakes I was talking about. First big one, do not impulsively buy a domain that is $8,000, all right? So dataengineer.io, I bought that domain like in the summer of 23. And I was like, yeah, I'm the data engineer guy. A lot of y'all probably know me as the data engineer guy, right? And I was like, yeah, I got to get the data. I was debating between two domains. So there's dataengineer.io and then dataengineering.com, right? Dataengineer.com was 100K. So I'm glad I didn't make that mistake, right? I made the dataengineer.io mistake, which was 8K. And so why does that matter, right? 6 months after I bought that domain, I realized that I didn't want to just teach data engineers. And that like I would even talk to people who were like, why should I join your product if I'm a machine learning engineer or a data analyst or a data scientist? And it's like, great point, honestly a great point. And that's why I moved my company name from data engineer to data expert, because data expert is intentionally vague. It's like just anyone who uses data. So it allows for a wider tent and a wider brand and a broader reach. Because I don't know if you know, there's actually like 10 times as many data analysts in the world as there are data engineers. So if I'm teaching people, like, it makes sense to not be dataengineer.io and be dataexpert.io. Dataexpert.io, by the way, was only $2,000, so could have saved a lot of money. Another mistake, crying in AWS console for days, right? There too many times. Trying to set up my own services, trying to be like too technical, because you know, it comes back to this whole idea of like, I worked in big tech for so long. I built this identity around, I am an excellent engineer. I build scalable systems. I know how to do things the hard way. I don't need to use anyone's help, right? Which is dumb if you're doing a startup. It's really dumb, right? It's actually better to leverage as much help as you can with other SaaS products. Like, there was so many situations, so much pain I could have avoided. I probably could have avoided like a month, maybe 2 months of work here had I just been like, no, I'm just going to use a SaaS product. Okay, not researching, right? Did this a lot too. This is a mistake and not a mistake, because as an entrepreneur, you should have a bias towards action. Because if you are someone who's like, I'm only going to do work once I have a perfect plan, then you're never going to be successful, because you're just going to procrastinate. That's procrastinate. That's procrastination masquerading as perfectionism, right? So this is both a mistake and not a mistake, because there's a trade, right? You want to be prepared, but not perfect, right? If you want to have the optimum velocity as an entrepreneur. So like in this case, like for me, it was like, I just didn't even research, right? It was like, oh, Kafka, oh, Heroku has Kafka. It's the first thing that came up, right? Or like with CloudFront, right? It was like, oh, I should have set that up, because I even set up my own streaming architecture, like my own video streaming architecture at some point, because I thought I was like, oh, I can do this better. I can do it better than Netflix and Amazon. Watch me, right? I'm one guy. And just learning that like, nah, these companies are big and worth trillions of dollars for a reason. They have good services, leverage them, and also research. Learn what you do best. Learn why people are buying from you. Learn the unique value that you're providing. And that allows you to avoid a lot of this suffering of like just trying to write all the code yourself. Not using AI sooner. This one is so clear, so obvious, so many places, right? And now when I'm building products, I think about it completely differently, right? We're like, for example, right now I'm working on a product to add quizzes to all of my material, right? And before you might be thinking, oh, you build a form and you have the instructor add the question with the multiple choice answers, and then they submit the form, and then the form gets uploaded, and then that's all of it, right? But like, that's like the kind of full stack, 2010 way of thinking of solving that problem. But the 2025 way of thinking about solving that problem is you get the video transcript, you pump it into ChatGPT and say, give me a quiz. And it works. It works great. And you want to be thinking about like how you can leverage AI in your products faster and better, because now that's going to be so much better, because instructors shouldn't have to think about making the quizzes. The quizzes should just be based on the material. All right, shifting gears here a little bit. We're going to talk about the future of data engineering and AI, because I'm sure a lot of y'all are wondering about that. So talk about 3 different buckets of things here. We have pipeline, boilerplate generation, context building and RAG, and agents. These are going to be the 3 areas that all of y'all are going to want to be really considerate about. So I don't know if y'all have tried this one, the text to SQL. I'm sure some of y'all have done that, like give me the number of sales in India, and then like people put that in as English, and then it gives you a SQL query. And everyone's like, data analytics is dead. It's dead, right? But then it's like, if you try to ask it to like do 2 joins, then it's like, it just dies, right? It gives you it just throws up and like, it doesn't know what the hell's going on. So like, it's obviously not that great. So like, I still think data engineering still is gonna have to do most of the SQL. You might dabble with doing some SQL generation, and as long as you have the skill to recognize when the AI gives you something wonky, then it can be something that can speed you up. But be careful, because it comes back to the whole thing of like, ChatGPT solves the problem in 5 minutes with 8 hours of debugging or something like that, right? You want to be careful. So, but the place I love AI for is for boilerplate. Because in data engineering, there's not that many patterns, right? You can think of like cumulative tables as a pattern, slowly changing dimensions a pattern. You have like fact modeling as a pattern, write, audit, publish as a pattern. Data quality checks are very standard. So like these 5 to 10 patterns that are in data engineering, like when you ask ChatGPT, like give me the boilerplate, not necessarily the SQL, but the actual boilerplate of like the DAG tasks, that's a very powerful place to like kind of then you fill in the details very quickly. I noticed this when I was at Airbnb, the last couple months at Airbnb, I was like, wow, like I just wrote that pipeline like 2 days faster because of that. So it's interesting. Another big thing, sure you guys probably pulled this a lot from the other presentations, is like this whole idea of AI. Really, the only thing that we really need to do when building AI now is just give AI a lot of context, right? And context is really context building. So it's like get as much context as you possibly can to let AI make a decision. And if you can do that, you're going to be very wealthy. Because it's like, then you mean AI engineer, go build a SaaS product, be very far. There's three ways that you can essentially build context. Vectors, graphs, and relational databases are going to be your 3 main ways that you want to be building. Let's go back one. Let's talk a little bit more. So vector databases. Vector database is like fuzzy search, semantic search. That's like blobs of text, chunking, right? So you got to learn about like how to chunk up text in smart ways. And it's very much an art. One of the things I've recognized is like if you try to like Google like what's the best way to chunk text, the answer is there isn't one, right? There's like, depends on the use case. There's like so many other like things that you want to be thinking about here. It's like similar to data modeling in that way where there's like, it really depends. You have a graph. Graph is amazing for like looking up entities, looking up data, right? It's very flexible schemas, very flexible. Like if you have like entity resolution on a document, and then it pulls in all the entities from the graph. That'll like you can think of it as like someone asks a question, it's a user, and you need to pull in all the user information, and then it allows the LLM to like be able to make decisions about that user with the context of that user's information. Graph's really great. Relational database is underrated. I feel it's the one that people forget about, like because it's like boring, right? It's like just use Postgres, use like where clause and whatnot, right? Filter down to just like rows and columns again, which you can still use for building context, by the way. Last but not least here, we have agents. I don't know if you know, there's actually a terrible, terrible statistic about data engineering, which is 85% of data engineers are experiencing burnout, right? And I don't know, for me, when I was in the last 6 months of my time at Netflix, I was on call for 6 months straight. Right? And that's why I quit. I was like, I'm not doing this. I can't be on call. I can't keep getting woken up at 3 in the morning. I'm going insane. And one of the things that AI is going to do is it's going to allow on-call to be way better. Because we have this whole idea of, like, whenever I fix a broken problem, a lot of times, like, the problems are, like, fixable automatically because they're a false positive or a memory problem. It's like a majority of the on-call problems are actually automatically resolvable. So then we will only actually have to, our on-call will only be for the very rare problems that are like genuinely hard to troubleshoot problems. All right, so conclusion. You want to be able to have AI change your life. Changed my life a lot. Allowed me to build my one-person empire. And it's time to build. The future is to build. I'm sure there's hundreds of people in this room right now. Y'all are very hungry. Y'all are ready to build. Y'all are ready to be successful. And AI is the way to get there. Thank you very much.
Hey,
yeah, what's up?
Jack, I'm Kalyan. So with all this that you have built, are you going to come up with advocated positions for real-world problems?
That's a great question. Like, kind of like becoming like a consultancy, or?
Right.
I mean, I have loved that as an idea of like matching people up. It comes back to like doing what you do best and focusing on your strengths. And like for me, doing that business development of like pulling in the contracts and like pulling in the people and being like, because you know, I've taught thousands and thousands of data engineers now, and like I have a lot of them that are really good, and like that would be a great business model. But for me, that's where I would need someone else to work on that, right? That's where it's like, it's that balancing act of like, how many people do I want versus how many people like should be in the company. But like, it's something I've definitely thought about.
Right. So what is the best architecture, let's say, for a hyper-personalization problem, right? I mean, so you know, across the stack that you threw on your screen. So something like that, right? You've exposed to the technologies, but then what is the best architecture for that problem, right? So
yeah, I love that. I love that as like because I want to do more like advanced stuff like that, like where you talk more about like what is choosing best architectures and like kind of like that senior to staff kind of path of like how to get people to that next level. I love that.
So thanks for a great presentation. But as you were saying, there were you had a lot of tools, lot of technology. So sometimes do you feel overwhelmed? Like, oh, I need to know AI. I need to know, you know, this data modeling and many other stuff that keeps coming in. So how do you keep up with that? And as you said, you made bad choices, right? So when you want to make a new choice, and obviously, let's say you want to, you know, take some service, and obviously the person will try to convince that is the best for you. So how would you keep up with the trend, and doesn't it overwhelm you, and how do you do that essentially?
I mean, I will definitely not say that it's not overwhelming. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, especially the last, I feel like there's been an increment in velocity in that space of like, well, like everything that we're learning, and we got to keep building and keep growing. It's like, it comes back to like thinking about like when you're on a learning path, you want to be thinking more about like, what is the technology doing at the end of the day, right? For example, like if you know Airflow, right? You probably don't need to learn Prefect, Dagster, Mage, and Databricks workflows, right? Because those technologies are the same thing, right? They're all just job orchestration. Similarly, like, you know, you have like Snowflake, BigQuery, Redshift, freaking Spark, like everything in that space, right, is like just distributed compute, right? And like, so if you can understand more of like the underlying architectures, you'll realize that there's only like 4 or 5 things, right? And if you can learn those things and you learn one of them really well, picking up the other one is not too hard. Like, for example, like I taught Snowflake, you know, over the last 6-7 months, and I'd never used it before. And people, you know, people in my boot camp were like, this guy knows what he's talking about. And I'm like, and I probably had less experience in Snowflake than a lot of the people who I taught, right? And it comes back to like, when you learn those fundamentals, that is the biggest thing, right? And that like that, and as the technology changes, it's fine. You can approach that with confidence.